Hello, I'm Christina Brown, and this is Our Take on Arise TV, a talk show focused on the topics and stories related and of interest to women. And today's guest host is Kelly Smith-Beatty. She is back. Welcome back, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, well, listen, you've got a lot of Our Take fans. Kelly, you might remember, was a contestant on NBC's Apprentice and is now a communications and marketing strategist. It's been a couple years since you've been on The Apprentice. What have you been doing since?
I have been doing public relations and marketing, which is what I was doing prior to Apprentice. What's different now is I focus squarely on women's issues, so that's why this show is so exciting to me. It's so close to home. We get to have great conversations through our lens, so I'm excited to be here, and let's start talking.
Well, that's wonderful, because one of the stories that we're going to be paying a lot of attention to is women in the digital world. And later in the show, we're actually going to be talking to a woman who is trying to make a career transition and really trying to figure out how she best markets herself digitally so that she can capture the attention
of people. It's a changing world, and it changes every day. So, you know, I look forward to meeting her, and I hope I can, you know, share something with her that'll help.
All right. Well, welcome back, Kelly.
You.
Also with us today is Hillary Crossley, another former guest co-host here on Our Take.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, this is alumni weekend.
Love it.
Yeah, well, thank you both for being here. Hillary, as you might remember, is founder and editorial director of Parlor Magazine, as well as New York bureau chief of the Washington Post online magazine, The Root. And Hillary, you're going to be with us here today to help us get through the Daily Take, which is all of our news of the day, top stories, and we've got a lot going on today.
Yes.
Topping the list is President Obama making his third and final stop on his trip to Africa and Tanzania today. He stopped by Senegal late last week and spent some time in South Africa over the weekend. But in Tanzania, it was cheering crowds that met the president in Dar es Salaam. For some, the time spent in this particular East African nation came as a surprise choice. But White House officials say Tanzania has a strong and vibrant democracy and is an important partner on a range of security issues. And Hillary and Kelly, this is certainly a very different image than what we were seeing when the president first arrived in South Africa, where he was met by protesters.
It was so interesting, actually, because the report said that while the protests weren't necessarily long in their time span, people were upset. And it was primarily students of the University of Johannesburg who had set up outside where Obama was going to speak later, and the police had to quell their riot with rubber bullets and gas.
Which is really serious and really intense. And for this particular visit, it seems like this would be the last president, right, who would be met with this kind of response in Africa. We're talking about an African-American president, one whose father is from Kenya, one of the countries that he's not visiting.
Too much drama going on in Kenya.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, because of our support of Israel and the student support of Palestine, they felt like, you know, he wasn't being true to what he was saying he was supporting in terms of, you know, the underdog and what we're doing politically. They just didn't agree with. And so they took to the streets.
And Kelly, I can only imagine if you are part of the entourage of White House officials that are trying to brand or market this trip, what must they be saying? What are the conversations that are going on?
Well, they know. I mean, you know, the advance team that goes into any country does a tremendous amount of work before any, particularly someone of the president's stature comes in. So it's something that they know, it's something that they are prepared for. But what I think is particularly about Tanzania is I actually was, you know, had the privilege of spending some time there a couple years ago, and I went with the great legendary Ambassador Andrew Young, and the Tanzanians are very hungry for an African-American presence in Africa. And so one of the things that we heard consistently is, why haven't you come back for us? The Chinese are here, you know, where are you? Our country and our continent is developing, but we don't see your faces. And so I think that the celebration that was surrounded the president is reflective of that. I think it's great, for better or for worse, that we're actually opening up conversations about Africa, its government, its economics, and, you know, the relations that stand to be gained between a U.S. presence there. So I hope that the conversation continues. I hope that we see more engagement on the continent.
And we did see some pretty exciting announcements made by the president over the weekend when it came to American investment in Africa. We understand that while he's in Tanzania, he's actually going to be visiting an American-owned oil infrastructure power company. So we definitely see where just his visibility, of course, raises the visibility and awareness of the other American and Western-owned companies in those countries. So clearly a very important visit indeed.
Very.
And speaking of Tanzania, keeping on that note, First Lady Michelle Obama is expected to speak at the first African First Lady Summit tomorrow. The Obamas, as well as President Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush, are also expected to attend. African First Ladies from across the continent will gather for the George W. Bush Institute Summit. Its focus is on the important role that First Ladies play in promoting women's education, health, and economic empowerment. What an interesting photo op that's going to be.
I want to see Laura Bush and Michelle Obama dancing together.
Which we saw. We saw
groove.
plenty of President Bush and Laura Bush dancing during his visits to Africa.
Right. Awkwardly.
Right, awkwardly. Didn't quite have the same rhythm as some of others. But this is also a very important, not only summit, but visibility and role that's being given to the First Ladies of Africa in terms of what their impact is and what they can do for the people that their husbands or presidents or leaders of.
I think it also sort of speaks to the lack of Obama's presence in this area, because where's the Obama is great institute? Like I'm looking for that if as an African American, and I'm sure as an African, I'd say, okay, well, all these other, let's say it, white men have come here and they have institutes, they're holding lunches, First Ladies are getting together and putting on their good head wrap. Like, where are you?
Right.
And I think while I love Michelle Obama and I support her, especially when she calls out people who are interrupting her speech, this is what I don't do. Oh, really?
Right, and of course you're talking about when she was at the fundraiser, someone interrupted her over
and I love, she
of
gives
gay
me
rights.
life.
Yeah.
I love it. But at the same time, I want her to sort of pull Barack aside and say, boo, I feel like this weekend has been a marker for us.
Yeah.
And this has been great, but we should start something of our own.
And there's a possibility that perhaps we might see more from them after he leaves office.
Absolutely, and I think in fairness to the president, I mean, Bush is over. He did, some things while he was a sitting president, but this is his legacy, and he has a lot to clean up. So I think we'll see what happens when the Obamas actually leave office as well.
And we've got another big story topping the headlines here on the Daily Take. Unfortunately, one of a sad note. 19 firefighters died in a fast-moving wildfire in central Arizona on Sunday. They were actually part of an elite firefighting crew and were trying to protect themselves by setting up tent-like structures before they were overtaken. The fire has now already destroyed more than 200 homes in Yarnell, Arizona. That's a town of about 700 residents, and it's about 85 miles northwest of Phoenix. It is now the deadliest day for U.S. firefighters battling a blaze, a wildfire, since 9/11, when 340 people died. This is such a sad, sad story. Imagine your first responders out there trying to protect you, and then they lose their lives.
It's just very, very sad. Extremely sad.
There's no getting around it.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, too, the early reports indicate that apparently this was sparked by lightning. But they've also had 3-digit temperatures for several days. And let's not forget that in many ways, this is very much the beginning of summer and also the beginning of fire season.
In the middle of global warming.
In the middle of, yes, that too, especially for those who choose not to deny that it exists.
Exactly.
Well, in other news, today begins the second week of testimony in the George Zimmerman trial. Zimmerman is on trial in Florida for the killing of teenager Trayvon Martin. Reports say that this week the focus will be on more scientific-type witnesses, unlike the ones who testified last week. And we're actually going to be speaking a little further about one of the witnesses last week, a little later in the show, Rachel Jeantel, who prosecutors consider their star witness. But you're smiling. Dare I ask?
I feel for Rachel because I've been on a stand before, and I've been on a stand in a murder trial. We're not going to get into that. That'll be for another time. But you can't imagine the levity of every single word that you say and the way that they can pick it apart to make you wonder, well, did I do that? Was I there?
Yeah.
And so I think she really held it together. Again, also though, the comments that have come from people, specifically in the African American community, I think are showing more about that person.
Yes.
For example, Lolo Jones.
You're talking about the Olympian who
And
had
she tweeted and made an off-color Medea joke about Rachel
But
in the middle of a murder trial.
But I think the other thing that's really fascinating is how we are seeing how quickly the prosecution is going through all of their witnesses. You know, much of the testimony that we saw last week centered on the voices and images that witnesses thought that they saw and heard. We heard from a number of people who had made 911 calls. Obviously, we heard from Rachel Chantel, who was on the phone with Trayvon Martin just moments before his encounter with George Zimmerman. But this week, at least what we're hearing and seeing today is we are now hearing from the scientists, right? We're talking about the people that are going to pick apart the crime scene video, the scientifically dissect the audio files. But nevertheless, it still comes back to this 17-year-old boy up against a then 28-year-old grown man, and how it's captured the national and international audience in general.
You know, I think this week, we'd have to go back to the science. It's such a human case, and it raises so many of our own biases and our own prejudices, wherever side of this that we fall. And so last week, it was a very human experience. I mean, you saw it on social media, people talking about what they heard and how they sounded. But, you know, I think in the circus and in the zoo of it all, we forget that this is a real murder case, and we have to look at the evidence, and we have to play everything that we have to really bring justice for, I hope, the Martin family. Every time they show Zimmerman's picture, I mean, it just makes my skin crawl. And the witnesses today are very important because they kept out several bits of information that the prosecution wanted to enter. So I think this will be a very important witness. It could be a game changer for the case, but you know, we've had the human aspect, and now we have to really bring in the science to it.
Yeah. Another case that will eventually be decided by a judge, this one coming out of California, where a judge is expected to rule on whether yoga is a religious practice that should not be taught in public schools. All this after a family in the Encinitas Union School District filed a lawsuit in February claiming that the 30-minute classes are inherently religious. Now that, of course, would be a violation of the separation between church and state. And I swear, Hillary, if you roll your eyes one more time, and as we wait for the judge to decide, we should know that some teachers and parents have noticed that since students have been practicing, they are claiming that their kids are actually behaving a bit more calm and they are more focused since yoga has entered their lives. All right,
I'm
Hillary.
waiting for this. I'm just like, go, Hillary, go.
You rolled your eyes backwards.
And it's so ridiculous. Like, it's so ridiculous. People get into these, and first of all, let me just say, I'm a Christian. I like to pray. Jesus is my friend. But like, just because I'm doing downward facing dog doesn't mean that I'm having a religious experience. I'm stretching. You know what I'm saying?
And you know what's interesting about this case is that the school district has said that they have gone to great lengths, right, to take out the religious components or the spiritual, actually, she said the spiritual components that are part of yoga. They've gone to great lengths to do that. The other thing is this is a class that's actually an elective. This is not something that is mandated that every child
Can you imagine? School gym full of kids, teenagers.
You know, so when you think about, hey, one, your kid doesn't have to participate.
No.
Two, we have taken out what we think are really are the spiritual components.
Aspect,
and if you take yoga, you know that there is a position
which
that
they don't even force them to do anymore.
Yeah, so there's no prayer position or anything like that.
And you don't have to thank your body for what it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah, you don't have to say namaste.
You know?
I mean, you know, what an amazing point of privilege for this to be what you're upset about in your school.
Right.
You know,
so true.
Forget school violence, forget
First
not
world
having
problems,
books. Right.
hashtag.
You know, what my heart bleeds for you.
Yeah, like tell your kids you don't want them to stretch, whatever.
Yeah, but getting back to your point, and I like how you first identified yourself as a Christian. I can tell you that there was a church that I used to go to many years ago that absolutely the pastor did preach from the pulpit that he did not think that yoga was a wise practice for the congregants of this particular church.
Really? I'm sorry to laugh.
He absolutely did. He did not think that it was
devilish.
Well, he didn't say that.
Satan is coming through your pose.
He didn't say that. But in discussing this story with some of the other people in the newsroom, there were some that said, well, you know what? I can identify with the parents because I do see yoga as something that I consider is religious. Yoga at its heart is spiritual, right? Yoga at its heart is not just stretching.
Right.
But now, at its heart, we'll have to have a judge decide.
Right. Well, after it becomes a national fad, though, how spiritual is it really?
And that is true.
I think that's the point. How many people truly practice yoga
properly?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Hillary Crosley, thank you so much for joining us for today's Daily Take.
Please ask me about anything yoga and spiritually related. I love it.
And I'm going to, of course, ask you to come back again and again and again. Thank you again. And we are on Facebook and Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter by simply going to @OurTakeAriseTV, but you can also like and leave comments on our Facebook page by heading to Our Take on Arise TV. I'm Christina Brown, and you are watching Our Take.
Bigger, stronger, and more domineering than any other. Elephants are the centers of the animal kingdom, but unfortunately today, they're under attack. Tens of thousands are being killed each year just for their ivory. So please support conservation and never buy products made from ivory, because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Ndingululu Chumsila, mna ndingumama owasindayo kwi-cancer, i-cancer eyayisisibelekweni. Thina bantu, imistake yethu apha ikhoyo, kwawuthiwa umntu une-cancer, simjongela uba laa mntu ngomso uzosweleka. Andizange ndibe nabunzima kakhulu, ngoba into ebangela uba nditsho, eyam yabhaqwa msinyane, ngoba into enyanzelekileyo kuba ube nethemba xa kuthiwa unento. Isapoti endayifumanayo kumyeni wam, kubantwana bam, nefemeli yam yonke. Eyona nto ndandinayo mna entliziyweni yam kukuba okusalayo nam ndizophila ndifane nabanye abantu.
Lo myalezo niwuphathelwe yi-JSI and Livestrong Cancer Anti-Stigma Initiative.
I wonder why anyone would do that to themselves. We all need air to breathe, to live, and so does the earth. But we're choking it with plastic bags. Let's stop using plastic bags and give the earth a chance to breathe. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle.
We are discussing the trial of George Zimmerman, and we want to hear from you on Facebook and Twitter. Join the conversation at #OurTakeAriseTV, and remember to leave your comments on our Facebook page, Our Take on Arise TV. Tell us what you think of the case. And of course, Our Take has continuing coverage of the killing of Trayvon Martin, the trial of George Zimmerman. And as week 2 of the testimony gets underway today, there's one witness in particular who had everyone's attention last week. And joining guest host Kelly Smith-Beatty and me is Rutgers Assistant Professor Brittany Cooper, Assistant Professor of Women's Studies and Africana Studies at Rutgers University. She wrote a piece for Salon called Dark-Skinned and Plus-Sized, the real Rachel Jeantel story. Painting Rachel Jeantel as combative is a classic way to discredit the validity of Black women's traumas. Thank you so much, Brittany, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us is Edward Wyckoff Williams, contributing editor for the Washington Post online magazine, The Root. Williams has interviewed Trayvon's father and the family's lawyer and written extensively about the case. You're back, Edward. Thank you again.
A pleasure to be with you.
Truly appreciate it. Brittany, I have to start with you.
Sure.
Your piece, if there was a bullseye that had a target on it, you hit it right dead in the center.
Thank you.
Tell me, what made you feel like you had to put this to paper and tell this story?
Actually, you know, a friend called me and said, are you watching the trial? And part of it was that I didn't want to watch this trial because I knew it would be very traumatic, that these things are painful. So I watched, she said, they're picking on this black girl. You gotta watch it. So I tuned in, I watched the video of her first day of testimony. Then I tuned into the second day, and I was infuriated at the condescension, at the combativeness from the attorneys.
From Don West.
Absolutely. And the fact that that was floating to the background for people, and that her defensiveness, which was understandable given his combativeness, was sort of coming to the fore. And I wanted to get a sense of what people were embarrassed about. But as soon as I saw her, I moved through the world as a dark-skinned, plus-size woman when the weight watching is not going well. And then immediately I said, oh, this is about all of our issues around body size, around fat hating, around sort of colorism issues, and around who we can trust to hold our stories and advocate for justice for us when so much is at stake. And those things became very apparent to me on multiple levels when I tuned in.
You know, Edward, we saw online how Twitter and Facebook and a number of different social media places went all abuzz, really ripping Rachel apart. And what I found kind of shocking and embarrassing is how so much of it seemed to come from the African-American community.
Yes. I think David Love did a piece that hit on some of the themes that Brittany did. He did it for Ebony Magazine, and he talked about how we as African Americans often try to make white people more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And so a part of that is wanting to put our best face forward. And Rachel Jeantel, with her dark-skinnedness and her inarticulate English, isn't the best of quote unquote us. And I think he talked about this with respect to sort of the bourgeoisie black society, right? And I think we're comfortable when our representatives are Barack and Michelle, yes, or people like us who are all educated. And that fits a narrative that white people can accept, or through our eyes, white people can accept. Because let's be very clear that there are loads of inarticulate white people in America. There are loads of hugely uneducated white people in America, and ignorant white people in America. But yet we have this burden of blackness, which is to be perfected in a way that they don't have to be, right? And so I think that that's a part of what was playing out with her. And I think it's a part of what was playing out in the social media, because people felt that she was embarrassing us, and by proxy, therefore, embarrassing Trayvon. A lot of people, because we've heard about this quote-unquote girlfriend for so long, whether or not she was or was not his actual girlfriend really doesn't matter. I think we wanted her to be pretty in a way that was acceptable to white people, articulate in a way that could tell his story best. And what she came with was truth and realness in a way that would make anyone uncomfortable, really, because the whole point of this trial is to get at a truth that makes Americans in general uncomfortable, right? And I think that that's a part of that's the dynamic and the paradigm that we're struggling against, that Brittany so brilliantly articulated.
And I think the other thing, Brittany, that you bring out is the fact that, let's be realistic, this is also someone who speaks multiple languages.
Absolutely.
She speaks Spanish, she speaks
Haitian Creole.
Haitian
Yes.
Creole
Yes.
And English. And even though there are some that might consider her functionally illiterate because she did not write the letter herself to her mother, this is still someone who, albeit might be uneducated, does not mean that she is unintelligent.
Right.
And it seemed like what you were also saying in that article was, don't judge a book by its cover.
Absolutely. Well, partly I'm saying, so a few things. One is, there's this wonderful quotation from Martin Luther King when he was doing all of the marches, and an older woman had marched in the Montgomery bus boycott, and she was tired, and he said, "Mother, can we get you a ride?" And she said, "I ain't no ways tired." And he said, you know, the ungrammatical profundity of her statement really buoyed him, right, and showed him the power of this movement. And I think that is what she represents for us, that movements and justice don't have anything to do with folks' command of English grammar. What we have is a dead young man here who lost his life for senseless reasons. And she was there to testify about his life and about what he was doing. And all of those things float to the background because we're so focused on the external, the presentation of it. And to me, one of the things that I really wanted to bring out in the piece was that this was in some ways the very logic that got Trayvon killed. The inability to understand how he was moving through the world. So his outward presentation, a hoodie, automatically meant he was a threat. So a hoodie makes Skittles and iced tea become lethal weapons, apparently, right? And apparently dark skin and plus-sized
It's not palatable.
Absolutely makes you an untrustworthy witness. And so challenging, so in some ways, if folks can believe Rachel Jeantel, then they can believe Trayvon Martin. And if they can't believe her, then they won't believe him. And that is why the stakes are so incredibly high.
I think the other thing, among many things that stood out, was also the disconnect that the defense attorney, Don West, had in just simply understanding and being able to effectively communicate with Rachel, and to the same extent, Rachel with Don, I thought just played out on so many different levels, right? I mean, that just spoke volumes about our own relationship.
Yeah, I was livid. In part because I don't actually buy that they didn't understand her.
That's right. Yeah,
Well,
that's what I was going to say. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at what I think he played his role effectively. And if you're on the prosecution side, then you should be pissed off by the time, his examination is over. He did what he was set out to do, which is to discredit her. And I think that he did it brilliantly in that it's not that he didn't understand. I think he recognized that most of Middle America wouldn't understand.
Yes.
And so if I can exacerbate that and bring that to light, then I can, render her guilty, and through her, they're all the same. They all run around like this little pack of wolves, and I think he did that
And I think that
effectively.
that's what's so deeply problematic is that he completely understood
Absolutely.
and understands. All these people are from the South, one. And so the vernacular isn't that different. And one of the points that I made, I was on NPR talking about this very subject. And I made the point that yes, have gone to Yale, gone to law school, gone to Oxford, but I'm still a boy from Newark who understands how black people talk who aren't necessarily as educated as I am. And so Rachel Jeantel made just as much sense to me as all of my cousins, all of my sister, my brother, and my grandparents. And so I think that there's something deeply problematic about not forcing Americans to be multi-contextual, moving from one context to another, in the same way that she could, moving from Spanish to Haitian Creole to English.
Right.
And so it's sort of almost, it's a slight in such a weird way because her brain is far more adept at understanding the nuances of language than his is.
Yeah.
This is a man who only speaks English. And so this idea that somehow because she's using a vernacular that's different means that it's incorrect is deeply flawed, one. And two, goes to the heart of everything that Brittany wrote about in terms of understanding what it means to be a black boy moving through the streets and just wanting to be left alone because all you did was go get Skittles and you're on the phone to a girlfriend and you just want to get home and look at basketball.
But it was a mistake that cost him his life. And
Exactly.
And as Brittany put it in your article, I would argue that despite all of the accolades and all of the credentials that Edward Wyckoff Williams just mentioned, essentially what you were writing is what anyone else would see is simply a black man
Yes.
Absolutely.
who was a threat.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you both for being here. Please come back. Brittany Cooper wrote an amazing piece from Salon, and you're going to come back. I'm just admitting it.
Definitely.
Just putting it down out there right now. And Edward Wyckoff Williams,
A
thank you
pleasure.
so much for your
A pleasure.
continuing analysis as we cover this case. And you are watching Our Take.
24 seconds. That's what you get to make it happen. You can run the break, find the big man inside, or swing it out and hit the three. Grab the board, and you get a new 24, just like that. But unfortunately, for endangered animals, there's no reset. Many are now facing extinction, and when their clock runs out, they're gone forever. So please, support conservation, and never buy products made from these animals. There's no more time to waste.
When was the last time you drank one of these? Last week? Today? Right now? Did you know how much sugar was in that sweetened soda or entire bottle of a sports drink? Read the label next time. In this can of soda, there are 39 grams of sugar. That means 10 sugar packets or 10 teaspoons of sugar. The American Heart Association recommends that preteens and teens don't intentionally add more than 32 grams of sugar, which is 8 sugar packets or 8 teaspoons, to their diets per day. On average, kids ages 8 to 14 consume between 21 and 33 teaspoons of sugar per day. That's 3 or 4 times the limit. Yikes! Choose water, seltzer, milk, or unsweetened tea instead. You can control your sugar intake. Choose what you consume.
I came to Africa to see this. But I also found this. Every year, thousands of elephants are being killed just for their tusk. If we buy ivory, we're just helping the poacher. So please, don't do it. Because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Welcome back to Our Take. I'm Christina Brown, along with my guest co-host, Kelly Smith-Beatty. And our next guest is a beautiful, beautiful example and proof that anyone truly can beat the odds. She went from being a homeless single mom to mayor. Dr. Evelyn Wynn-Dixon joins us from Riverdale, Georgia. That's a city about 15 minutes outside of Atlanta. Getting to the mayoral seat, Dr. Wynn-Dixon, I'm sure was anything but easy, and she is here to share her story and hopefully inspire others to do their best while she's at it. But also with us is Gwen Butler. Gwen Butler is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in individual counseling and psychotherapy and life coaching. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Gwen, and thank you, Dr. Wynn-Dixon, for joining us today. Dr. Dixon, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very well. Can you hear me?
I certainly can. Thank you so very much for joining us today. Your path to success, like I said, has been anything but easy. Can you give us a sense of, one, where you were 20, 30 years ago and how you were able to accomplish all that you've accomplished thus far?
Well, it was very, it started out when I was very young and was in college and made an error and had to come home with a baby, and my life turned around. But it all came from the foundation that my mom and dad and grandparents and the church instilled in me about getting up after you make a mistake.
I understand, Dr. Dixon, that you went from being a high school honor student to being a 19-year-old college dropout, having to return home with a baby, and then there was the sudden loss of your mom, so now you were taking care of your child plus siblings, and at one point you were even homeless. Can you just kind of give me a sense of how do you even wrap your mind around, I've got these really tough obstacles ahead of me. How do I get out of this? Where did you go to build yourself up?
First I went on a pity party. You know, here it is. I was this young girl, beautiful figure, long hair, had the world in the front of me, and here it is now. I'm a voluptuously full-figured woman with 4 children. Husband left me, and my baby had a birth defect. Well, I took the coward's way out and tried to commit suicide, but at my lowest moment, that's when God stepped in for me. I had an epiphany and heard my mom's voice in the wind. People think it's a fairy tale, but it's the truth. I heard my mom's voice, and when I heard her voice, she asked me why would I open up my eyes in hell. And she said education was the way. So after I couldn't jump off that bridge when I saw that tractor-trailer truck coming, had a gun, no bullets, threw up the aspirin. So I didn't have a choice but to live. So I went back to the root, that if I make one step, God will make 2. And so that's what happened for me. I grounded myself in knowing that my mom taught us that nobody owes you nothing. Nobody can ride your back unless you bend it. And if you make one step, God will make 2. You just got to be believing and taking no days off. You just got to do it.
Dr. Dixon, your story is just amazing, and it's powerful. And I have to ask Gwen, who we have here in studio, we just heard Dr. Dixon talk about her turning point. I mean, she went from being suicidal, actually going to a bridge, and I'm getting ready to jump off this bridge, to hearing her mother's voice, who had passed. Her turning point was this voice from her mom. Not everyone necessarily has that kind of turning point.
Right.
Where do you begin to pull someone out of their troubles?
I tell you, when someone is going through something like this, you really have to pull from a place of resilience. And for her, for Dr. Dixon, she had a very strong foundation. She had a very strong upbringing. She also had a very strong level of faith. So she was able to pull from strength outside of herself. So when you're really sort of suffocated in something very tragic, you do have to look for some kind of support outside of yourself. I like to call that scaffolding, whatever that is. If it's your faith piece, if it's your friendship piece, if it's your mom, your parent, a mentor, someone that you can pull from, a therapist, where you can really tell your story and be validated and sort of be strengthened in that space. It's really about seeking that space outside of you and then transferring it inside so that you can be inspired internally to then come forth, such as Dr. Dixon. She is truly an inspiration, truly.
But how is it, why is it that some people, Gwen, are able to bounce back and others are not?
That resilience factor is really something else. And I tell you, when a client will come into my office, there are two questions that they'll ask. And one is a very existential question. Why is this happening to me? Right? Why is this happening? And the quick answer that I have for that is there's purpose in your pain. There is purpose in your pain. You may not know it now. You will know it. Eventually, you will know. And then the second question is, how do I get out of this? Why is this happening? And how do I get out of this? And very concretely, as Dr. Dixon has done, tell your story to a therapist, to someone who can validate you through it, help you work out the feelings that come out of that. You know, and then number two, that scaffolding, that support system is crucial for someone to be able to come out of something. And then finally, it's really about resisting the urge to regress. And I read somewhere Dr. Dixon, when she did buy her home, she was afraid to go in it. And that really speaks to, you know, when you're going through some kind of tragedy, you really start to believe that you deserve this. You brought it on yourself. So when good does come, you're so afraid to embrace it. You don't even go in it. You don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's the good that's pulling for you. Yeah. And so really fighting to resist the urge to regress to that space, you know, it's about support. It's about who you have in your corner, really pushing back the folks who are just pulling you down and really bringing closer the folks who are bringing you up.
And Dr. Dixon, I understand that you've been sharing your story with just about anyone who will listen. You're referred to as the people's mayor. You answer all your own phone calls and respond to all your emails. And it's my understanding Kelly Smith-Beatty, who's actually an Atlanta homegirl, that's where home is. You know, your city is also a very important city when it comes to its relationship to Atlanta, and you've really regenerated Riverdale just by your own personal story.
Well, you know, my thing is, in regards to the doctor, I did ask myself, God, what did I ever do to deserve this? Who did I ever hurt? I repent and forgive me, and I'll do whatever to overcome this. But then I had to learn that sleeping in an apartment, rat-infested apartment, roach-infested apartment on a mattress with 4 babies with a birth defect. And her legs have now since been corrected. It wasn't for me. It's for me to be a motivator and a role model for people who were presently in my position that I was in previously, to let them know that God is able to do anything but fail if you dare to try. And to do that, I just love helping people. I do it, don't take no money. I'll hug the homeless, the veterans, or whoever. And they call me the people's mayor because I help the homeless, the battered, the domestic abuse people, anything, creating businesses with the council that I work with and the city managers and clerks. I don't do it by myself.
Dr. Dixon,
because
can I ask?
I've been so blessed with huge economic growth, balanced budget, surplus, not a huge, but we were working, and God is just so stupendous until I'm afraid not to help people that I may lose what I got.
Dr. Dixon, I'm from Fayetteville, and so I know Riverdale intimately. And I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know the city, and I'm sure seeing you, one of the things we often hear is that there's a disconnect between the politicians and the people, and they don't know our struggles and they don't understand them. Have you found that you've been able to not just connect with the people, but legislate your city in accordance with your own understanding, having gone through that?
Yes. In fact, I have a huge connect with the state capitol. The governor has given me 2 major appointments in the state. They voted me the Woman of the Year for the county. So locally and the cities and stuff, we connect. We even now have a mayor's committee where all the mayors meet together and we make decisions, working with transportation, jobs, and everything. So, yes, and I tell you what's the biggest thing for me is I don't think more of myself than I am. I don't see myself as mayor. I see myself as the mama of the city. And as the country people used to say, I got to go take care of my children. And also to let people know that your zip code don't make you. Your environment don't make you. You make it. So if a man thinketh, so is he. If you think you're an heir of the king, then you can do it. So what if you wore the same dresses and people used to laugh at me, make fun of me? So what if I used to walk 9.5 miles from Georgia State to my apartment? How bad do you want it that you can be a water walker and do what you got to do? And all those people who laughed at me had to come back to me for help. So I have to let people know that your children don't have to be, it's not necessary. Your children are the product of their community and a single parent.
Dr. Dixon, I'm so sorry. I absolutely do not mean to wrap you up. Your story is so powerful, so important. I certainly hope that you will come back again on Our Take to share your story. I thank you so very much, Dr. Evelyn Wynn-Dixon, joining us today from Riverdale, Georgia, a wonderful example of a woman who has certainly beaten the odds. And thank you, Gwen Butler, for also joining us here live in the studio.
Thank you.
And you are watching Our Take.
Basketball, it's a numbers game. But just listen to these numbers.
1 in 3 adults in this country are at risk of developing diabetes.
1 in 3.
Just think about what that looks like in here. Our families,
our friends,
our fans.
Let's change those numbers.
Learn your risk factors for diabetes.
Go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com and take the risk test.
It's fast, free, and easy.
Remember, your health depends on you. To learn more, go to dribble2stopdiabetes.com.
Bigger, stronger, and more domineering than any other. Elephants are the centers of the animal kingdom, but unfortunately today, they're under attack. Tens of thousands are being killed each year just for their ivory. So please support conservation and never buy products made from ivory, because when the buying stops, the killing can too.
Two-thirds of the Earth is water. Can you swim?
Our Take kicks off a 3-part series called Women in the Digital World. My guest co-host, Kelly Smith-Beatty, and I welcome Patricia Scarborough as well as John Krant. Patricia was not using social media, but is now embracing it, and she is looking for a job. She's going to tell us a little bit about that. And John Krant is a career coach and speaker and author of Self-Recruiter, Changing the Rules, How to Be Your Own Recruiter and Ride the Economic Crisis to Your Next Career Challenge. Well, John, I'm going to quickly start with you. I would imagine that this has got to be a very, very difficult time for a lot of people.
You know, it really is. I mean, I think that the challenges of what's gone on with the economy have turned the whole job search arena upside down. You know, I have folks that have had the initiative to even walk in the door to introduce themselves, and then they get turned away at the door these days. Yet we have an opportunity, essentially, with our digital presence to change that equation and really level the playing field and open up the avenues of access in our job search.
Patricia, are you as optimistic as John is when he talks about the employment landscape? I understand that you're making a career transition from retail executive to wanting to work for a not-for-profit organization. Do you see this as just an exciting, wonderful time for you?
I do, actually, the importance of embracing social media as well. Because that's how we get ourselves to be visible. It's awareness and exposure. And it's the times we're living in. The traditional job search is no longer. Yeah. And so certainly we have to embrace social media and be a little more technology savvy.
John, what is the best digital platform that people should be using when they're out trying to market themselves, looking for a job?
You know, it can be distracting. There's so many digital platforms, but in job search, that place right now is really LinkedIn. From my view at least, it is really where we have to nurture and develop our online presence of credibility. You know, if we don't exist online today in our careers, we don't exist. They're going to look at us if we're down to, say, the few folks they're seriously considering. Then they're going to take our name and they're going to Google it. So, you know, gosh help us if we're not controlling what we're doing on the internet. But then they'll take it over to LinkedIn. And if we don't really have the right presentation of what we've contributed, how we've accomplished certain challenges over the course of our career, that'll get missed.
So you're saying LinkedIn over, say, a monsters.com or other kind of job search website?
You know, the Monster, Career Builder, all these websites, they have their place in job search. But if you're on them, specifically you're looked at as someone searching for a job, and that can have a negative side to it as well. We tend to like people that are employed. And yet LinkedIn is not really about that. It is about nurturing what you offer professionally, whether you're looking for work or not. And that's a much more interesting story if you tell it the right way.
And I understand that we have a LinkedIn graphic right now. I understand that you also worked with Patricia when it came to her resume.
Yes.
So I want to quickly just go over some of the things, John, that you suggest should be on your LinkedIn profile. You say create an engaging profile, jazz up your headline, and energize your summary. Talk a little bit about these 3 points.
You know, there's a lot of resistance to whether I should include a picture or not on LinkedIn, and I know all the issues that surround potentially having a picture, but there's only 2 reasons we get hired, assuming we're capable for the role. If we're capable for the role, the reasons we get hired are chemistry, number 1, and confidence, number 2. And those are elements we can begin to build right away, even from the first impression of the picture. Do we have the drive and energy, enthusiasm and passion and presence that they're looking for? Can they make an instant connection with us? And then, of course, what you say in your small headline, which to me is really the 140-character resume, that little area that says, who are you? Why are you unique in your profession?
Absolutely.
And then our summary area is this wonderful area that is really large as far as a real estate perspective, but that's where we can begin to control and disseminate our story. You know, we've fallen in the trap in the past of including everything in the kitchen sink. They might like me for this, they might like me for that. But that's a dangerous road that dilutes our value. If we simply figure out what our value is, distill it down to its very essence, then it becomes a very compelling telling of our story.
And Patricia, you had a resume, and then John looked at it. What were the differences in the resume that you had prepared and then John had reviewed?
The difference in the resume I prepared and what John did for me, he simplified and had all the key words jumping out at anyone who would come in contact with my resume and in a split second would make a decision, this is someone I would love to see, opposed to having to read through and not taking the time in this economy to read through a wordy resume. So John was very effective in getting my resume up to date so that it would quickly capture the attention of that person.
So you tighten the copy.
Yep.
You would, I'm assuming, make the resume only 1 page, no matter how long you've been in your particular career field.
That is
Even if you've got a 19, 20 years on the job, you got to condense it to 1 page.
Yes.
And then I understand that you want for the place positioning to be at the top of the resume. Was that something that you also had to change?
Yes.
So you
Yes.
had a lot that you had to change, and we're actually looking at the resume now. I believe, is this the before resume, or is this the after?
This is the after.
This is the after resume. So this is now one page.
Yes.
The place positioning is at the top, and I understand you also had to edit your accomplishments. So there are certain things that you have to decide, you personally decide, are the most important. But then, isn't that kind of difficult when it's your resume? How do you decide what you think is the most important accomplishment, because you've accomplished them all?
Well, at the same time, you know, in the accomplishments, it's what's priority to you and what you were most passionate about. What felt really rewarding to you. And although all of the accomplishments did, I pretty much scored them and then made that decision.
John, there was a story that was out not too long ago about a woman, an African-American woman, who talked about how she made a duplicate resume, but changed the name to something that she considered less ethnic. Exact same resume, and the difference was that she found out that she got more phone calls and more emails based on the really false resume, even though it was the same resume, but it was an artificial name.
Sure.
How does someone even deal with that? I mean, if your name is your name.
I mean, it's very, very tough. I mean, we can't change who we are at essence. I think what you have to focus on is how people make their decision. And while we may fall in the trap of choosing people that seem familiar, maybe that's really what we're experiencing is people are naturally migrating toward who's familiar to them. Well, we have to bridge that gap, and we can do it with how we tell our story, how we draw people in and get them excited. You know, whether it's the resume or whether it's the LinkedIn profile, it's about how do you create interest and excitement for what you've done so they just have to speak with you.
You use the word story, which I, as a PR branding person, love, but it is about that. And we have a lot of people in the market right now who are trying to switch careers.
Sure.
So talk about the story. How do you explain the transferable skill set? She's going from retail, obviously interested into moving into nonprofit. How do you take something that may not at face value be one and the same, but how do you make that story translate?
Well, I think the way it translates is you focus in on what you are most proud of and most excited about, and that is something that's transferable. You know, you look at Patricia's background, she has a stunning background, and you sit and look, well, why would a nonprofit, if you've been in the commercial world, why would a nonprofit want all of this expertise? Well, nonprofits and foundations need that commercial experience, and they're also full of a lot of folks that have been in nonprofit and foundation for a long time, so they don't necessarily have the commercial skill that someone like Patricia brings to the table. That is a very attractive skill set. You don't have to only portray yourself as exactly like it, but this is my interest and this is what I bring to the table.
Absolutely.
Well, I have to say thank you to you all for joining us, particularly the fact that this is our first part in our three-part Digital World series. Thank you,
Great.
John Krant, a career coach, as well as Patricia Scarborough. We certainly wish you the best
Good
of
luck
luck
to you.
in your job search. I have no doubt that you will
We'll be
squarely
seeing you
on
in
your feet.
nonprofit land soon.
And thank you, Kelly
My
Smith-Beatty,
pleasure.
joining me once again as guest co-host. You know I'm going to ask you, will you come back?
Anytime.
You're good. All right, wonderful. Thank you all. I'm Christina Brown, and you are watching Our Take.
24 seconds. That's what you get to make it happen. You can run the break, find the big man inside, or swing it out and hit the 3. Grab the board, and you get a new 24, just like that. But unfortunately, for endangered animals, there's no reset. Many are now facing extinction. And when their clock runs out, they're gone forever. So please, support conservation and never buy products made from these animals. There's no more time to waste.
I wonder why anyone would do that to themselves. We all need air to breathe, to live, and so does the earth. But we're choking it with plastic bags. Let's stop using plastic bags and give the earth a chance to breathe. Refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Two-thirds of the Earth is water. Can you swim?
It is now time to go from our take to your take. We want to hear from you and see what you've been up to online. Here's what our Twitter friends have been tweeting. LaShawn Martin, she says, I can't relate to the dark girls experience, but I can certainly feel the pain of my friends and family who have. That is, of course, in reference to the Dark Girls documentary that we talked about last Friday, a documentary by director Bill Duke that shares the stories of women of African-American descent who are dark complexion, shares their stories of heartache and of beauty and the definition of beauty. That tweet coming from LaShawn. This tweet coming from the brand new mom saying, dark girls, an existing conversation about self-hatred. Gotta break the cycle with children and the message. Thank you so much for that message as well. This tweet coming from official Shooty. 10,000 women were rejected from shelters in one day nationally. That tweet, of course, coming from someone in response to our segment last Friday about the expansion of VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. Thank you so much for that message. And this message, this Twitter message, coming from Mocha Moms, women who are victims of domestic violence are labeled homeless when they leave the shelter. That is right. That is a label that is all too often an incorrect label. This Twitter message coming from MB Wilmot saying, prevention goes a long way in addressing domestic violence, particularly in teaching our children self-worth and respect. And thank you so much for all of your Twitter message. Please keep them coming. As you know, I am online. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. See you back here, of course, at the same time, same place. But before I say goodbye, I have to first leave you with this look of amazing video. This coming from a Maasai dancer and fire eater. Let's take a look. Kids, please don't try this at home. Thank you so much for watching Arise, Our Take. I will, of course, see you online. Until we meet again on air for tomorrow's Our Take. Have a great day.
Nice, Christina. All right, let's get...